We're going to switch gears a little bit right now, move from where do plants come from, and we're going to be talking about where fruit comes from, because you know what? It can come from your own backyard. Joining me is Jim Camus. Jim is the fruit specialist for Texas AgriLife Extension, and welcome back to Central Texas Gardener.
Thanks very much, Tom.
Hey, we are going to talk about a great topic right now. In fact, it's a red-hot topic in Texas gardening, and maybe even nationwide, and that is home fruit production.
Yes, it is. You have a lot of interest in people wanting to grow their own fruit.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different reasons for that. People want fresh food. They hear this term local food, and it can't get more local than your own backyard.
That's right, and you know, and anybody that has a home, it adds some permanence to your home to have something that's going to produce fruit over a long period of time.
Yeah. Well, it's this kind of a sign of home in a way, too, to have that. And we're going to be focusing on some varieties that people usually, when you talk about fruit trees here in Central Texas for decades, we've always started with peaches, things like that. This time, however, you're steering us in a different direction. You want to talk about figs, pears, and pomegranates.
Yes, I mean, there is some interest in some fruit crops that take a little bit of either chemical or fertilizer inputs, and those are ones we found that we can grow with relative ease here in Central Texas.
Well, you know, and I think that's also a big matter of concern, is these are very sustainable fruit crops in that they require very little intervention in the way of chemicals and that sort of thing.
Yes, we have a planting in Fredericksburg that's going into its third growing season. We've applied no fungicides, no insecticides, and no synthetic fertilizers. We're using all organic sources of nutrients, and they're doing all quite well.
Oh, well, that's all great news, and I know that people love to hear it. So why are we talking about fruit trees now at the beginning of January?
Well, now's the time that people should really be thinking about getting fruit trees in the ground. I mean, really, the best time to plant fruit trees would be in the fall, but you just don't really have the availability of containerized trees. Most fruit trees come and sold from nurseries as bare root trees, and so they're typically dug, sorted, and then shipped in early to late winter for planting early spring.
Is there an advantage if you can find a container-grown one over the bare root? I would kind of, and if it was just me, I'd err on the side of a container-grown tree.
Absolutely, because if you plant a container-grown tree in the fall, you have all fall and all winter for those roots to continue to grow. So in the spring, when you have bud break and the leaves start to come out, you have an established root system to support that tree.
Yeah, but a lot of these just aren't available that way.
No, they're not. I mean, it's a matter of shipping. In order to transport a tree in a container, it takes a considerable more money, and you're going to pay more for a containerized tree than a bare root tree.
Okay. One thing that we have to discuss when we talk about fruit trees is pollinators. A lot of fruit tree species require a different variety of the same species to get pollination in actually a bare fruit.
Correct. Peaches are pretty much self-pollinated. Plums, it depends on the variety. Methley and Santa Rosa are self-pollinated, but most of the others need another variety, as you mentioned, of a similar chilling requirement to pollinate them. Apples and pears are traditionally considered to be cross-pollinated crops.
Okay. So pomegranates and figs, not to worry about that?
Well, pomegranates are self-pollinated, and actually what we call figs, we eat figs, are not fruit. They're strictly, we call it the fleshy mesocarp. We're eating the flower of the common fig, so pollination is not necessary.
Ah, okay. Well, I learned something new today, and that's really cool. So in terms of keeping this sustainable, low impact, what's the best fertilizer regimen for these trees that we're going to be talking about?
Well, the biggest fertilizer need for all of these trees is going to be nitrogen, but the way we approach this in Fredericksburg, we actually had a very poor piece of soil that we put up raised berms, and we incorporated a tremendous amount of leaf litter that we got from the landfill. It was free. We simply had to pay for trucking, and the deterioration of this organic matter has given us all the nitrogen we've needed.
Right.
So as you continue to top mulch to control weeds, that organic matter continues to decompose, and so far we've had no need for organic or inorganic sources of nitrogen on any of these crops.
So just compost, really, and turning in the compost into your regular garden soil.
Yes, and even trees that are somewhat sensitive to high pH, the more organic matter you add, the more available iron and zinc, some of the less available nutrients at high pHs become.
Yeah. For fruit production, generally we're talking about plants that really do require full sun.
Absolutely. You know, a tree is going to be somewhat leggy, and it's not going to be very productive. It's in the shade. It may survive, but it won't be productive.
Yeah, so just bear that in mind. If you've got a giant oak tree in your yard and you dream of harvesting any of the things we're going to be talking about, probably not a good idea.
Not a good idea. That oak tree was there first, and it'll certainly outcompete it for light and certainly water and nutrients as well.
Okay, so low impact in terms of fertilizer, it sounds like. Basic soil supplementation. If you have compost, turn that in. Maybe in caliche soils, maybe breaking up some of that caliche even?
If you have caliche soil, it is a good idea to break it up and incorporate some of some compost or decomposed organic matter, certainly just to supplement the soil structure.
You know, people often ask me on my radio show about how come their fruit trees don't bear well. And one of the first things I say is, what's growing underneath of them?
Yes.
If they have lawn growing underneath, that really competes a lot with the trees.
It does, and many times people water to meet the needs of the lawn and not necessarily a deeper watering to meet the need of the fruit trees, and the fruit trees will suffer.
Yeah, so what I usually recommend is remove the grass and put down a lot of mulch or mulch blended with compost.
Yes, at least to the drip line of the tree. From the trunk to the drip line is what we typically consider. It needs to be weed-free, and the compost will not only control weeds, but will help control soil moisture.
Okay. Now, and final thing on the sustainability piece, the trees that we're going to be talking about, figs, pears, and pomegranates, I can't think of pests really that become a problem with them.
Not really. You know, in some wet years we may have some fungal pathogens, but we can typically control those with a dormant spray of copper sulfate, which is considered to be an organically approved compound. But no, that's just it. We have chosen these varieties because although we may have some insect activity, they're not a limiting factor to growing them.
Yeah, and that's really different from, say, the peaches, for example.
Peaches are pretty high intensive spray input. Yes, they are.
So you know, if for people, and I'm one of those folks. I love peaches, love having them in the yard, but if I have to spray them, you know what? I'm not going to do it.
Sure.
You know, so let's spend some time now talking about these different varieties. I want to start with pomegranates because this is like the darling of the fruit world right now, and there's some new varieties that are coming in from Central Asia that you were mentioning that sound really promising.
Yes, it is. There's a lot of interest in pomegranates, even to the point of commercialization here in Texas. There are a number of people that are planting commercial groves. We do have some new germplasm that's from Azerbaijan and northern Iran that it not only incorporates good fruit quality, but also appears to be quite cold hardy. We had 7 degrees Fahrenheit at our planting in Fredericksburg this year, and we had any range of winter injury from total death, frozen to the ground. But some of the varieties were completely untouched, and some of the soft-seeded varieties like Sunbar absolutely surprised us at 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Didn't touch them.
Okay, now Sunbar is the name?
Sumbar, Sunbar.
Is that actually commercially available yet?
Well, we have some nurseries just now starting to pick it up and propagate it. So it'd probably be a year or two before they're in commercial trade. But if you see them, those are certainly ones that we suggest you put in and give them a try.
If you wanted to actually grow a number of pomegranates, what kind of spacing would you put them in?
We have ours spaced at 16 feet between the rows simply because that's the space it takes to get our tractor and mower. But we have our tree spaced at 12 feet between trees. That's going to be a pretty tight spacing, pretty dense planting once they're mature.
Now, another tree that you're recommending are pears, and this is really and everybody, old-timers here in Austin, have always said, you want success with a fruit tree in Austin, plant a pear. Yes. What are your favorite varieties?
Well, Kiefer is kind of the standard variety that fire blight really won't touch.
Everybody loves it.
It does, and if you let it ripen well, I had some last week, they were wonderful. But we really have some very high-quality French hybrid pears that can be grown here. Ayers and Warren are some that, they're available in the nursery trade, but you don't hear people talking about much. And another one that I've discovered is LeConte. And LeConte's another old variety, but my neighbor across the creek had some LeConte a couple of years ago, and I ate myself silly. They were just some of the best pears I've ever eaten. So quite fire blight tolerant and very high quality. Okay, and you really can't go wrong with these trees. They can get big. But this isn't, again, speaking of sustainability, you typically don't need to prune the pears. No, you kind of bend the rules with pears because the more you fertilize them, the more vigorous they are, the more susceptible they are to fire blight. So we typically let the grass grow under it and we mow them. We don't fertilize them much. We don't water them a whole lot. So we want a nice slow-growing pear trees. But the one thing about Being a pear grower, you have to be patient. Some of these varieties don't start bearing until they're 8 or 9 years old.
Okay, all right. Now the figs, this is another fruit that has really come on in terms of popularity in the grocery stores and other places. So I would imagine we're seeing new varieties coming in on the fig side.
Yes, we are. And the old standard varieties that we'd see here were Alma Celeste and Brown Turkey. Brown Turkey was cherished because after a year where it froze to the ground, it was the only one of those three that would come back and bear fruit that same year.
Yeah.
We have 42 different varieties of fig under evaluation in Fredericksburg. We had, again, 7 degrees Fahrenheit, took everything to the ground with our figs, but 2/3 of our varieties bore fruit this year. And so we have some new varieties that are quite different in texture, quite different in flavor, and it's just something unique to offer the public.
Well, I know people are going to enjoy learning more about this, and they can do that through the websites that we're going to be touting on our own. So if people want the complete list of those varieties, they can find that information there. For more information about fruit trees, including tips on varieties, fertilizing, and pruning, go to klru.org/CTG. Jim, thank you so much for coming on board. Tom. This is a great topic for, I know, lots of folks out there who are really serious now about growing their own food. Well, coming up next, it's our friend Daphne.